The detonation cord lies coiled in the mud, like a dead snake, its waxy coating split and waterlogged from the botched night drop. Staff Sergeant Jake McNiece crouches in the hedgerow, his hands trembling, not from fear, but from the bone-deep exhaustion of 36 hours without sleep. Somewhere in the Norman darkness, German voices drift closer. The bridge spanning the Douve River sits half-rigged with TNT, its stone arches stubborn and intact, while his scattered demolition charges rest uselessly in a crater 50 yards away. The mission was simple on paper. Blow the bridge before dawn, deny the Germans their supply route, buy time for the advancing infantry, but nothing about this night has gone according to plan. 3 hours earlier, McNiece and his section of the Filthy 13 had dropped into the wrong field, their C-47 pilot disoriented by flak and fog. Half their equipment bundles landed in German-held territory. 2 men broke bones on landing. The primer cord they'd carefully measured and tested back in England now lies in pieces, some lengths too short, others damaged beyond use. McNiece stares at the frayed cord in his hands, knowing that improvisation has become survival. 12 paratroopers scattered across these hedgerows are counting on his demolition expertise to get them out alive. The original plan called for precisely placed charges at the bridge's structural weak points, with redundant firing systems and carefully timed delays. McNiece had briefed it himself, walking his men through every step until they could rig the bridge blindfolded. But plans belong to daylight and perfect conditions. Reality is this: standing in knee-deep marsh water with damaged explosives, listening to the distant growl of German armor moving through the village beyond the river. The bridge must come down, but every conventional method has been stripped away by chaos and misfortune. Private Eddie Samuels crawls up beside him, his face streaked with mud and blood from a scalp wound. "Sarge, Kowalski's pinned down in that barn. Kraut's got him zeroed with a machine gun." McNiece doesn't look up from the damaged cord. His mind works like a fuse burning backward, not toward destruction, but toward solutions hidden in the wreckage of the original plan. He's always been the regiment's most unpredictable demolition man, the NCO who argues with officers and improvises when textbook methods fail. Tonight, that reputation has become a burden 12 men are betting their lives on. "How much TNT we got left?" McNiece asks, though he already knows the answer. 3 satchel charges, waterlogged but possibly functional. Enough to crack the bridge's foundation if placed perfectly, but not enough to guarantee collapse. The Germans will cross at dawn. He can hear their motorcycle reconnaissance probing the far bank. From the company command post in a bombed farmhouse, Lieutenant Morrison watches the operation through field glasses. The young officer clutches his radio handset, waiting for confirmation that the bridge is down. Instead, he sees scattered paratroopers and the dim outline of the intact span. Morrison knows that in 3 hours, German panzers will use that bridge to outflank 2 companies of infantry. The weight of that knowledge presses against his chest like a stone. The detonation cord represents everything wrong with this mission. Careful preparation undone by circumstance, tested equipment rendered useless by mud and mishap. But as McNiece examines the damaged sections, his demolition instincts begin reshaping failure into opportunity. The cord's outer jacket may be split, but the explosive core remains intact in several key lengths. The Norman countryside stretches before them like a waterlogged maze, each hedgerow hiding potential death. McNiece moves through the darkness with the careful patience of a man who understands that one mistake will doom everyone depending on him. The spliced detonation cord coils around his shoulder like a question mark, its repaired sections held together with medical tape and stubborn hope. Samuels follows close behind, his breathing shallow with exhaustion and fear. "Sarge, this ain't gonna work. We're trying to drop a bridge with spit and prayers." "Then we better pray harder," McNiece mutters, examining the stone archway through the gloom. The bridge spans 60 feet of dark water, its medieval construction reinforced with German engineering. The enemy has added steel supports and concrete buttresses, turning a simple demolition into a puzzle that requires precise placement of insufficient explosives. The sound of German voices grows closer, a patrol crossing the bridge, their boots echoing off the stones. McNiece counts the footsteps, timing their rhythm, calculating how long it takes for each section to reverberate. The bridge talks to him in creaks and groans, revealing its structural secrets to ears trained in the language of destruction. From his position in the bombed farmhouse, Lieutenant Morrison receives another radio message from battalion. The voice crackles through static, delivering news that makes his stomach clench. Bridge must be dropped within 2 hours. German armor confirmed moving toward your sector. No reinforcements available. Morrison stares at his map, knowing that the scattered red marks representing his men are all that stand between 200 panzers and the exposed flank of the invasion. He sent word to McNiece twice, but radio silence from the demolition team suggests they're either dead or too close to the enemy to transmit. McNiece crawls beneath the bridge, his hands exploring the cold stone like a blind man reading Braille. Each arch tells a story of stress and load distribution, revealing where medieval masons placed their faith in gravity and geometry. The German reinforcements have strengthened the obvious weak points, but they've also created new vulnerabilities, places where modern steel meets ancient stone in joints that could fail catastrophically under the right pressure. The waterlogged TNT satchels feel heavier than they should, their canvas covers sodden with marsh water and fear. McNiece knows that wet explosives are unpredictable. They might fail to detonate, or they might explode with 3 times their normal force. In demolition school, instructors taught careful calculations and safety margins. Here in the Norman darkness, those lessons become academic luxuries he can't afford. Kowalski's still trapped in that barn, Samuels whispers as they work. Machine guns got him pinned solid. McNiece pauses in his examination of the bridge supports, understanding that every decision carries the weight of lives he may never see again. The tactical situation is deteriorating faster than he can adapt to it. His improvised firing system might bring down the bridge, but the explosion will certainly reveal their position to every German within a mile. The detonation cord snakes through his fingers like a rosary of destruction, each splice representing a prayer that physics will cooperate with desperation. McNiece has always believed that explosives are honest. They work or they don't, with no politics or favoritism. Tonight, that honesty feels like the only reliable thing in a world gone completely mad. The German machine gun position reveals itself through muzzle flashes, its crew focused on the barn where Kowalski remains trapped. McNiece watches the firing pattern, counting the seconds between bursts, mapping the gunner's field of view. The weapon's position dominates the approaches to the bridge, turning any movement into a deadly gamble. From the farmhouse command post, Lieutenant Morrison receives fragmentary reports from other units scattered across the Normandy countryside. The news is uniformly grim. Bridges held by the enemy, drop zones swept by machine gun fire, companies reduced to squad strength by the chaos of the night landing. The radio chatter carries the weight of an operation coming apart at its weakest seams. "Sir," Morrison's radio operator whispers, "battalion wants a status report on the bridge." Morrison stares through his field glasses at the intact span, knowing that honest reporting will bring down artillery on his position. But lying will commit 2 companies of infantry to an attack that may end in massacre. The weight of command feels heavier than his waterlogged gear as he reaches for the handset. McNiece signals his remaining men to provide covering fire while he low crawls toward the bridge. The stone is slick with night moisture, cold against his face as he works beneath the arches. Each satchel charge gets positioned according to his improvised calculations, not where the manual says to place them, but where combat experience suggests they'll do the most damage. The repaired detonation cord snakes between the charges like a nervous system connecting brain to muscle. Above him, German boots echo on the bridge deck as another patrol crosses, their voices casual and confident. They have no idea that beneath their feet, a half-crazy American demolition sergeant is rewiring destruction with damaged equipment and desperate ingenuity. Private Tony Kowalski presses himself against the barn wall, listening to bullets splinter the wood inches from his head. The machine gun has him trapped in a space no larger than a phone booth, and every movement draws another burst of fire. Through a gap in the planking, he can see McNiece working under the bridge, methodical as a surgeon despite the chaos erupting around him. The Filthy 13 earned their reputation through actions that made conventional soldiers question their sanity. Tonight, Kowalski understands why other units speak of them with mixtures of admiration and unease. McNiece works with the calm precision of a man who has accepted the possibility of death as the price of completing his mission. The spliced detonation cord holds together through sheer stubbornness, its damaged sections wrapped and reinforced with medical tape from McNiece's first aid kit. Each connection represents a calculated risk. The explosive core might fire cleanly, or it might burn through the splice and leave half the charges unarmed. In demolition work, there are no partial successes. Back at the farmhouse, Morrison makes his decision. Tell battalion the bridge is under attack. Demolition in progress. Request artillery support on coordinates I'm about to send. His radio operator looks up with surprise. Calling fire on their own position violates every tactical principle they've learned. But Morrison understands that conventional thinking died with the botched night drop. If McNiece can't bring down the bridge, then high explosives from friendly guns might finish the job, along with anyone unlucky enough to be nearby. The detonation cord coils through McNiece's hands like a prayer made tangible, each splice representing faith in physics and the stubborn refusal to accept defeat. He's always been the man others turn to when standard procedures fail, when improvisation becomes the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. If stories like this make you imagine what you'd do under fire, tell us in the comments how you think you'd react in this situation, and stay with us for the next chapters. The explosion comes in stages, not the single devastating blast McNiece had originally planned, but a rolling sequence of destruction that brings the bridge down in sections. The first charge detonates under the eastern arch, sending a shockwave through medieval stone that has stood for 6 centuries. The sound is deeper than thunder, a bass note that resonates through the ground and into the bones of every man within a mile. McNiece feels the detonation cord fire beneath his hands, the explosive burning through his improvised splices faster than his eyes can follow. For a heartbeat that lasts forever, he waits to see if his calculations will prove correct or catastrophically wrong. The bridge shudders like a living thing, its stone and mortar groaning under stresses that medieval masons never imagined. The second charge fires 3 seconds later, catching the eastern span as it begins to sag. Stone and mortar cascade into the river as the German patrol scrambles for cover, their confident voices replaced by shouts of alarm. The machine gun position swivels toward the bridge, its muzzle flashes strobing across the water like deadly lightning. From his position in the barn, Kowalski uses the chaos to sprint for better cover. The machine gun crew dives for their bunker as debris rains down around their position, giving him precious seconds to reach the hedgerow where Samuels waits with covering fire. The sound of collapsing masonry drowns out the crack of rifle bullets as McNiece's section melts back into the Norman darkness. Lieutenant Morrison watches through his field glasses as the bridge span tilts slowly into the river, its collapse taking on the inevitability of an avalanche. The sight fills him with relief and terror in equal measure. Relief that the German armor will find their route blocked. Terror at the realization that his scattered paratroopers are now trapped on the wrong side of the water with no way home. The third charge fires as the bridge structure reaches its breaking point, adding unnecessary violence to a collapse that has already become unstoppable. The explosion throws spray and stone fragments across both banks, marking the end of McNiece's improvised demolition and the beginning of a tactical situation that no training manual had prepared them for. McNiece rises from the riverbank with ringing ears and trembling hands, his uniform soaked with marsh water and scored by flying debris. The detonation cord hangs limp in his fingers, its explosive burned out and its mission complete. Behind him, the bridge settles into the river with the finality of a door slamming shut. Samuels appears at his shoulder, grinning with relief and exhaustion. "Jesus, Sarge, I thought for sure we were going to end up as bridge decorations." "Mission ain't over till we're back with friendly forces," McNiece replies, but his voice carries satisfaction alongside wariness. The bridge is down, the German armor is stalled, and his men are alive. In the calculus of airborne operations, those facts constitute victory, regardless of what happens next. The German machine gun position fires a final burst into the darkness, its traces arcing uselessly over empty hedgerows. The crew has lost their primary target and their escape route in the space of 30 seconds, leaving them isolated on the wrong side of a tactical situation that has suddenly reversed itself. Morrison's radio crackles with new orders from battalion. "Hold position and prepare for German counterattack at dawn." The lieutenant stares at the collapsed bridge, understanding that McNiece's improvised demolition has bought time for the invasion, but trapped his own men in a defensive position with limited ammunition and no way to withdraw. The detonation cord lies spent and useless in McNiece's hands, but he coils it carefully and slips it into his pack. Other men might discard the burned wire as battlefield litter, but he recognizes its value as proof that sometimes the most important victories emerge not from perfect execution, but from the stubborn refusal to accept defeat when everything goes wrong. 3 weeks later, McNiece sits in a replacement depot near Omaha Beach, staring at a letter from his company commander. The official commendation describes his actions at the Douve River Bridge in language that makes the night sound like a textbook operation. Staff Sergeant McNiece displayed exceptional initiative and technical expertise in successfully demolishing a key enemy position under hostile fire. The words feel hollow against his memory of that night. The taste of fear in his mouth as he worked under the bridge, the certainty that his improvised firing system would fail at the crucial moment, the sick knowledge that one miscalculation would doom everyone depending on him. The commendation mentions heroism and tactical success, but it says nothing about the 3 hours he spent afterward, vomiting into a hedgerow from pure nervous exhaustion. "You gonna frame that thing?" Private Kowalski asks, settling beside him on a supply crate. The younger soldier's face still bears scars from his escape from the barn, thin white lines that map his journey from the machine gun position to safety. "Might use it for toilet paper," McNiece replies, but his voice lacks its usual edge. The truth is more complex than either heroism or cynicism can capture. He's proud of the bridge demolition and terrified by how close it came to complete disaster. The detonation cord held together through luck as much as skill, and he knows that luck is a resource that runs out without warning. The real story of that night lives in details the commendation omits. The way his hands shook as he spliced the damaged cord, the moment when he almost abandoned the mission because the risk seemed suicidal, the prayer he whispered under the bridge while German boots echoed overhead. Those memories resist the clean language of military documentation, carrying emotional weight that citations can't capture. Lieutenant Morrison appears at the depot entrance, his face bearing the hollow look of a man who has seen too much in too short a time. The young officer has aged years in the weeks since the bridge operation, his confidence tempered by intimate knowledge of how quickly tactical situations can collapse into chaos. "McNiece," Morrison says quietly, "need to talk to you about that night." They walk away from the other men, stopping beside a stack of artillery shells that gleam dully in the afternoon sun. Morrison pulls out a folded report, its pages marked with official stamps and signatures that reduced the bridge operation to a series of tactical coordinates and casualty figures. Battalion wants details about your demolition method, Morrison says. They're planning to use your improvisation as a training example for other demolition teams. The irony isn't lost on McNiece. The same improvisation that violated every safety protocol he'd ever learned is now being elevated into doctrine, packaged for distribution to men who will face similar impossible choices in different Norman villages. The thought of his desperate splicing technique becoming standard procedure fills him with unease. Sir, what I did that night, it should have killed everyone within 50 yards of that bridge. The cord held together by pure luck, nothing more. Morrison nods slowly, understanding the weight behind McNiece's words. But it didn't kill anyone, and the bridge came down when we needed it down. The conversation continues in fragments, each man reluctant to examine too closely the thin line between heroism and catastrophe that defined that night. They both know that the operation's success depended on factors beyond training or courage: weather conditions that kept German patrols light, structural weaknesses in the bridge that medieval masons never intended, and the kind of luck that can't be requisitioned or planned for. The detonation cord rests in McNiece's pack like a talisman, its burned copper core proof that sometimes the difference between victory and disaster is measured in fractions of seconds, and the tensile strength of damaged wire. He carries it not as a trophy, but as a reminder that every successful mission is also a near miss with consequences too terrible to calculate. Would you follow the orders exactly, or trust what your own eyes and instincts tell you in a moment like this? Comment which path you'd take, and share this episode with someone who loves real human stories from history. 40 years later, Jake McNiece sits in his Oklahoma living room, watching his grandson play with toy soldiers on the carpet. The boy arranges plastic paratroopers around a wooden bridge, narrating their mission with the casual authority of childhood imagination. The scene carries echoes of briefings and battle plans, but filtered through innocence that war hasn't yet touched. Grandpa Jake, were you really in the war? The boy asks, looking up from his toys with eyes that hold no concept of what that question means. McNiece reaches into a closet and pulls out a battered box filled with medals, photographs, and a length of burned detonation cord that most people would mistake for scrap wire. The cord rests among his other souvenirs like a question mark, its frayed ends speaking to anyone who understands the language of improvised explosives. I was a demolition man, McNiece says quietly. My job was to blow things up so the bad guys couldn't use them. The boy examines the detonation cord with fascination, running his fingers along its damaged outer jacket. Did it work? Sometimes. The words carry weight that a child can't fully comprehend, but McNiece knows that someday the boy will understand the difference between success and survival, between heroism and the stubborn refusal to quit when everything goes wrong. The official histories of the Normandy campaign mention the Douve River Bridge operation in passing, a footnote to larger tactical movements that shaped the invasion's outcome. The records note that the bridge was successfully demolished by airborne forces, reducing McNiece's desperate night to a few clean sentences that reveal nothing about the human cost of that success. But memory preserves what official records omit. McNiece still dreams about the sound of stone falling into dark water, the weight of lives depending on his improvised expertise, the sick certainty that one wrong calculation would doom everyone trusting him to get the demolition right. Those dreams resist the comfortable distance of historical narrative, carrying emotional immediacy that time can't diminish. The men who served with the Filthy 13 scattered after the war, carrying their own versions of that night into civilian lives that couldn't quite accommodate what they'd seen and done. Some found peace in silence, others in storytelling that gradually transformed terror into adventure. All of them learned to live with the knowledge that their survival depended on choices made by exhausted men with inadequate equipment in circumstances that should have been impossible. Lieutenant Morrison became a high school principal in Kansas, his classroom authority tempered by memories of command decisions that carried life and death consequences. He never speaks publicly about the bridge operation, but sometimes his students notice him staring out the window with an expression that suggests he's seeing something they can't understand. Private Kowalski returned to Detroit and worked 30 years in an auto plant, his hands finding purpose in assembly line precision that echoed the methodical care McNiece brought to placing explosive charges. He keeps a photograph of the Filthy 13 on his workbench, their faces young and cocky in the way of men who haven't yet discovered what they're capable of surviving. The detonation cord remains in McNiece's possession like a relic from a different life, its burned core carrying memories too complex for public consumption. Veterans understand the weight such artifacts carry, not as trophies or curiosities, but as tangible links to moments when ordinary men found themselves capable of extraordinary things through necessity rather than choice. As his grandson plays with toy soldiers, McNiece reflects on the distance between legend and lived experience. The stories people tell about the Filthy 13 focus on their rebellious reputation and unconventional methods, but they miss the fear and doubt that motivated most of their actions. Heroism, as McNiece learned that night at the bridge, is usually just terror transformed into useful motion. The sound of a freight train passing through town brings momentary tension to McNiece's shoulders. The rumble of steel on steel still carries echoes of that Norman night, when everything depended on improvised calculations and the tensile strength of damaged wire. Some memories fade with time, but others remain fresh as yesterday, carrying the weight of choices that defined not just missions, but the men who survived to remember them. If this story reminded you that behind every medal and mission report there's a human being carrying memories we'll never fully see, subscribe to the channel, tell us which country you watch from, and invite someone to revisit history with us in the next story.